this covers a lot of ground. And I just decided just to include most of it. It was done at a time I'd just been seeing Pauline for a couple of years. The kids were ranging from 9 to 10 to 12, 13 in there. And we used to take a lot of trips out to Jones Beach. And this is one of those rides out to Jones Beach. And, you know, Cookie liked to drive, so this is over the Triborough, you know, that's how you get out there eventually to the southern state. And then you kind of cruise, and of course you can look back and you can, there are the World Trade Towers when they were still there, right? And then you get a good look at Long Island City, which you'd rather forget, and then on and on and on until we eventually would hit the beach. These trips were a way of just getting out of the city, and there were times, well, here we are at Jones Beach now, which is one of the great beaches, you know, and we have a great beach here in Sarasota. It's Crescent Beach, but it never gets the big Atlantic swells that you get at Jones, and it's the bottom is such on a couple of the beaches that you can really do some great body surfing, and it's very clean out here. You know, when they kind of took over the land, there were a handful of families they're allowed to stay, and they have homes right there in the middle of the Jones Beach state area in the marshes, but the park itself is wonderful during the winter to go down, and they have a little place that's open in one of the main concession stands, and you get that concession clam chowder, the New York clam chowder, you know, with the tomato base, which is for the birds. But anyway, we used to go out there a lot, and I probably have too many pictures of the surf here, but we'd go for long walks. I think that JD was with us on this day, and I thought I'd edited out a lot of this surf, but I hope we get past it soon. About the only person I ever knew who went swimming in this was John Corey. I used to camp in the winter on the tip of Montauk. It used to snow out there, and he came out with me once and went swimming. he just had to be nuts. Here we were, kind of, you're sitting on the beach trying to stay out of the wind. I guess that's what we were doing. But it's only about an hour from where we lived in the heart of the city, up in Washington Heights, you know. And of course we had to bundle up because it got pretty windy and it got pretty cold out here. And there's JD, he had his parka on and his coats and everything, so we used to stay out there for about 3 or 4 hours. It was nice just to get out of the city, and an hour away you'd be out right in the middle of an area that was so virgin and so clean. You know, Jones Beach goes for about 13 or 14 beaches. It's a huge beach, and I had my own favorites. I think was Beach 9, and you could go clamming there, and in the bayside the water was so clean, you know, it was so far away from anything. And here we are at the concession, you know, which is, of course, you have to walk, you know. I think that's me walking on it. I guess I hit a pole. This may be some camping we used to do, myself and Pauline, out in the Hamptons. It was on Sag Harbor Bay. I guess that's the best way to put it. Sag Harbor was across the bay, but it had the beauty of being a pine woods, and then it would just descend onto a bay where you could just go, you're snorkeling in 2 or 3 feet of water for the best bay scallops, you know. I don't know how that kind of snuck its way in there, but here we're just getting onto the Jones Beach parking lot, which, as you can see, during the summer would be filled. And I think these are some houses we passed. I like this house. It's in the middle of the winter. They had a greenhouse there, and I love their flowers. It was something just to go by and just to see all that little burst of color. I always made a little effort to go past that house. So I guess it was about halfway between New York and Jones Beach. This was taken on another day. I don't think this was taken on the same day, but we went down to New York during the Christmas season and to look at the department stores and at Saks and Bergdorf Goodman's and all the rest of them that are on Fifth Avenue, you know. And I took, of course, there's the Grand Central Station, you know, that you see in all the movies, and there's some pictures of planes or little models of planes in the Air Canada office, whatever it was. But you sometimes would go down to downtown around that area, you know, down around Rockefeller Center, Grand Central Station, St. Patrick's Cathedral. This is St. Patrick's, I think, here. Or would go to the docks in the 40s, where at that time that the big liners still came in. I don't know if they come there anymore. That's St. Patrick's, like the France and the rest of them. There's some of the store windows now. And you could get on board for about an hour or so before they sailed, even though you weren't a passenger. So it was great to go on those old liners. You know, they're all gone now. They were in their last legs when we used to go with the kids. It was, you could go all over the place, and there'd be parties, you know, little bon voyage parties people would have, and they were the grand old ocean liners. I used to love to go down to the ports, and the same thing in this area, which is in the 50s and Fifth Avenue, and it's really his part of the Rockefeller Center Park, where they have the ice skating rink and wonderful gold sculptures there. It's a nice area. That's one of the best things the Rockefellers did, was to build this. It's too bad they don't have the murals inside that were done by the great Mexican muralist, but he put a lot of communists in there, so Rockefellers got very upset about that, and they kind of tore them down. They had to remove them from the inside of the lobbies, but the remainder of the whole plaza there with the ice skating rink and surrounded by the shops and by, of course, the old and the new skyscrapers, you know, it was just a wonderful way to spend a Sunday afternoon. It didn't cost anything, and you could stop for a coffee or a drink or something. And I think we went over to the Madison Square Garden. I think this was the new garden. I think the old garden had been torn down by that time, and the circus was in town. And of course, Sarasota, where I live now, was the home of the circus. There's Cookie and Margaret, and I guess Margaret's about 14 here, and Art looks like he's about 11 or 12, and JD would be a year older. They're about the same height, and they're friends. And these were all shot with a kind of Super 8, and then they were transferred to a VCR, you know, the old tape VCR, and from there, that I took the VCR and I transferred them onto a CD, where in fact I brought them into the system. So they've been through a lot of transfers, and the transfer from Super 8 to VHS wasn't done electronically; it was done visually, you know, by filming the Super 8 screen. So you never really got a good definition. And then the VHS we transferred basically into a CD or a DVD just as raw data, and then we brought them in. So I've kept the picture small because that's the way that you can see the detail best. You can't really explode these well, but some of them I can, because they were shot in good light and things like that. But these were kind of shot at random during the winter and kind of low light. I was a little jerky with the camera, and I didn't want to go through a lot of the exercises you have to go through. You can take out, this JD, some of the jitter, but it takes a year and a day to process them. I don't know if it really gets any better. I think this was down at one of the parks. I'm trying to remember which park this was. This may have been up at the Cloisters. I'm not too sure. This Margaret would have been about 12 then, I think 12 or 13. I'll have to ask her. She's going to be coming up here for Christmas. This does look like the Cloisters. It's way high up. And I wrote a poem about this. It's called Mrs. Taliaferro, which is one of the best things I've ever done. And there's the Cloisters, that great walk on the Esplanade, which a lot of European Jews who came here during the Second World War to get out of Hitler's Germany live in that area, and it's almost like a little slice of Europe, you know, and the long walks and sitting on the benches. It goes on and on, but it's a nice spot because you can see the cloisters, which is another thing the Rockefellers gave us. There's the George Washington Bridge, and we lived to the left of it, in what were called the Bridge Apartments at the time. There's Art, Margaret, sucking up the sodas. I have to show these to Kelby. I'm going to send this up to Kelby via YouTube, and here are some of their friends. I remember Art's friend Alvin, and there's myself and Pauline. We'd have probably a coffee from one of the concession stands and try to get the kids to keep the camera still. But you can look out at the Hudson. You know, it's one of the great rivers. You know, you can look up towards West Point, and you can't see that far, but I've sailed up it on my Hobie Cat with my brother Michael. We went up pretty far, way past Ossining and almost up to Poughkeepsie, and we had to lay the Hobie Cat on the side of the river, but unfortunately the side of the river was a 45-degree rock embankment. Now here's one of the Europeans. They're just like they're in Berlin, you know. And that's me when I still had my hair. That was great, unbelievable. And I think this is one of those trick shots which you have to have, which doesn't look too bad now. And this was done, I think, I'm running the parks around Park Terrace West, where we lived. That's how Art met Alvin at the time. The kids lived down the block, and I lived up about a block away. So we got to see each other relatively easy. And here's the old kind of tree climbing things where they suddenly appear in the trees, and it's amazing how much energy they have, but they are. And of course, here's the Lou Adler, Ringling Brothers, 50 Clowns in the Trunk, coming out here. I guess Arthur was the first one in, so he was the last out. He was, yeah, okay. So, and here's the inside of the apartment that we had. You know, you can't see much of it, but I started to lean towards the tropics. My friend Dave Strickland, I worked for him, and then he kind of went on the skids for a while and got kind of lost, so I had him. He kind of stayed with us. He was called Dave in the living room, and he stayed with us, and he was an old Southern guy, and he would love to talk to Pauline and have cups of tea all day long. And then he'd hit the sauce, you know. But he didn't. He had a rough time as the time went on. He just didn't. He had a girlfriend over in the Near East, and he couldn't get back there, and it was getting on in years, and it was pretty dark when I spoke to him last time, which was about 15 years ago. He was just at his wit's end. Like I said, this is my dad. I guess this is right after he retired, and I don't know where this is. I bet this is at. This may be at his home. They had a home in New Jersey where they went after he stopped being a dean, basically, and retired. But he was very hyperactive. He had to always keep you moving. And my mom, you know, she looks pretty good there. And this is one of Fran's kids, who are now grown women with kids of their own. That was and my mom with Margaret, you know. I guess they were living in New Jersey. Looks like Mom's smoking a joint there, but she's not. That looks like a little water pipe she was trying to get going there. But she had a nice relationship with the kids. The kids liked her. They had mixed feelings about my dad, who was a little bit of a blowhard, you know. I don't know how to describe that, but he was very officious, you know. And of course, I grew up with it, so I just got used to it. But when the people were exposed to it for the first time, they were sometimes put off. But he was a good storyteller, and he was very social. But he had that garumph kind of thing about him, you know, and that came out once in a while. But I think this was their home maybe in Tom's River, or maybe around Barnegat. I'm not too sure. It's hard to say where this house was. I don't think it's... you know, this may be Fran's house, my sister Fran's house, because there's Ronnie, her husband, and there's... Look at the two girls. They now have 2 or 3 kids apiece. Here's Arthur and Margaret. So this was probably at Aunt Fran's house. She always had the nicest houses. I always liked to go to her house because it was always filled with little stuff, and it still is. Although I took a lot of pictures of the inside of her current house in New Jersey, but she was afraid people would break in when they saw what she had, which wasn't much. It was just a lot of pictures, you know, and some furniture. But people are scared today about pictures. They don't want pictures taken of them. They figure somebody's going to track them down. How they're going to do it, I have no idea. You know, you have to be some crazy crook to kind of sit around and look at home movies to figure out, you know, where these people lived, you know. There's no names, there's no nothing. But anyway, that's part of the current scare that's in the United States. People are scared of everything, basically. That they're just scared of life, you know. I just remember when I was a kid, I walked to school, and it was 2 or 3 miles to school, and we walked in the snow. We didn't have school buses. We didn't have people walking us back and forth, you know. And I'm sure there were the same number of creeps, but somehow that they just didn't show up, or if they did, you lucked out, you know. This is a camping site that's in the Hamptons. I don't know whether it's been preserved now or if it was finally developed. I heard it had been developed, but I found this by accident. Here I'm doing the Walk of Power from the Don Juan movies, you know, Don Juan books. Gate of Power, something like that. That's how you're supposed to walk so you don't fall down. So I was reading those books at the time, and I was very impressed by them. So I tried some of his techniques, which I guess are old techniques, and it's just basically letting your unconscious mind make all the decisions, which is something that I've learned to do. And I think it's a better way to live. You know, your conscious mind is just like a little polish on top of it, but your decisions are generally made on a much more deeper level. And here's our campsite. We used to camp here. We just overlooked the Sag Harbor. It was great. We did a lot of that. About every weekend we would drive out. It's about a 2-hour drive. It would sometimes get a little tough because people go out there to do the Hamptons routine, which I was beyond me. That whole bar scene, see me, I'm in the Hamptons. Even Puff Daddy's out there now, dressed in white. So anyway, this is the harbor that we overlooked. There was a sand bluff, a cliff there of about 15 feet high, and that's where the campsite was. It was a beautiful blend of sea and pine, which is very similar to where I live now in Florida, on some high ground overlooking Sarasota Bay. And this at the time was, you see, it's completely unpopulated. It basically was used by fishermen. And we'd go scalloping in that water, and like I say, you're 2 or 3 feet, the water's perfectly clear. It was great. And that's one of those scenes at night where things start to settle down, you start the fires up, and everybody, at the time, I think I was still drinking, so that was a great time to have a little schnapps, and watch the fire. And unless you wake up in the morning with a sinus headache from the smoke, it was incredible. But to think that you could find a place a couple hours from New York on the water, clean water, that combined both the woods and the salt water was just incredible. And it was relatively bug-free because the breeze was always there. It was high ground. It wasn't sandy ground. And there were some old ruins there too. At one time, if you walked around, you'd find a couple of graves and a couple of foundations of houses. So probably 200 years ago, there were some farms out there or something. But then the land was probably laid fallow. And here's one of the covers of the Don Juan books. I guess that's going to go on forever. And this is the cover from some murder mystery. I don't know. I guess we had nothing to do this day. And we're back with the crow. And we did some eye shots here to show how Don Juanish we were. I think that's Pauline's mouth and eyes. I could be wrong, but that looks like her. I don't know who else it would be if it's not her, to tell you the truth. So, and here it looks like somebody fell down and left the camera running. I don't know what the hell's going on. And what do we have here? This is a little kind of butterfly shot. I thought I'd just kind of zoom in my one nature shot. I wasn't that big on nature in terms of bird watching or things like that. I like the general feel of in nature. You know, I didn't necessarily want to catalog everything, but once in a while I would shoot some things that I thought were nice. This was a pine barren, basically, is what it was. And there you can see there's a little old roadway, I guess, that kind of led in. But in fact, we came in by boat. We had a rubber raft because kind of walk through those woods was tough. So we'd put all of our stuff in a big raft we had. It was probably about 300 yards, and we would get to the campsite. We'd walk up the cliff, and there we were. So these are some of the old paths that went through the area. And here I guess we're back. I can tell we're in my house. There's Aunt Fran when she was a young girl, and there's Ron. This is our house. I can tell by the big bamboo chairs, the big fan chairs, which I bought. I was leaning towards the tropics at that time. I didn't know that I'd finally wind up in Sarasota in 1979, but I was leaning towards it mighty heavily somewhere in my deeper self, and it all eventually kind of worked out that way. So there they are as young folks, you know, and this is our apartment at Park Terrace West. And here we're going to do the usual walk in and walk out, backwards and forwards. This is JD again coming out, and then they're coming out again as though they have no. There's hundreds of them basically coming. I guess you have to do these things. That's what it's all about when you make the home movies. Is you do kind of dopey stuff. And this is the area that we lived in. This is in Park Terrace. It's right close to Baker Field, which, if you know Columbia, that's where they have their baseball and football field. It's on the very tip of Manhattan, what they call Spuyten Duyvil. And the park there, which is called Inwood Park, is a beautiful park. At one time they had rowboats and stuff, but as the neighborhood kind of roughened, as we say in the business, that was, and here's a friend of Pauline's who was a nurse at the hospital where Pauline was a nurse at Columbia Presbyterian. But it was still a beautiful park, you know. It had trees that went back. It was called a Climax Park, according to my old friend Lenny Mirren, who was a landscape architect. The trees were there that were there from the beginning of time. And supposedly also that the giant tulip tree under which Peter Minuet bought Manhattan from the Indians, which is where they lived up in the caves there, was right down in the park, and you can see its base. It was huge. It was a huge diameter tree. And I think that we're back. Where are we now? We might be back at oh, you know where we are? We're down. There was a Spanish museum right where we lived on 153rd Street, and it was so out of place, I can't tell you, because it was on the edge of Harlem, you know. Those are some of the statues. It was a beautiful old museum. They had the American Indian Museum there. At one time, that was a very fashionable area. That's where the old Trinity Country Graveyard is, with Audubon and Samuel Morse are buried there. It's a gorgeous graveyard leading down to the river, or to the West Side Drive now. And I don't know what this nonsense is. I thought I had cut all the stuff out, but I guess I hadn't. That looks like we don't know what we're doing. And that looks like JD with his long hair at the time. We were all like the Beatles. Oh, that's Grandma and Pa. This is another house that they had. Or you know what happens is these reels, when they were put onto the VHS, they sometimes get out of sequence. I think this is the same stuff we were looking at before, but it's just some different shots, you know. And he's a big ham, the old man. He was right into it. And this I want to show to your grandson, Kelby, because this is art. playing ball with my dad, and of course my dad was named Art too. I mean Art. And then there was Art Jr., who was my brother, who died about a year ago, and so Art was Arthur III. And of course my father was a lefty, as you'll see, and he was always wanting to have someone be a pitcher. He was trying to get my brother Arthur to be a pitcher, but my brother wouldn't have anything to do with him. He just didn't like him. He just no. So when he got a chance to pitch ball with Art, and Art was right into the balls too. He liked to play ball, and he just swam, and he played basketball at Worcester Academy when he was up there. So it's a nice little shot of him playing catch with my dad. Of course, he missed a couple, didn't he? And this looks like a 10 shot for some reason. I thought I got all this stuff out, but in fact, I guess I didn't. So here's, I think we'll just take a break now, because this thing goes on and on and on and on. And this is a camping shot with Pauline waking up at our camp out in the Hamptons. She looks pretty good, doesn't she, for waking up? There's a tent. Those are great times. I really enjoyed that. It was just absolutely super.